that's that.
I let the saw drift away from the guide by maybe 1/8 of an inch, and in the end it didn't matter at all. That piece of aluminum extrusion was clamped at one end and then taped down at the other, and lets me make a perfectly straight cut with the saw, assuming I keep the saw up against the guide. And that tech stuff is a sheet of styrofoam insulation that I got at Home Depot, and then that plastic film that I put over is also from Home Depot. And it's to keep the resin off of the styrofoam, because I'm using polyester resin, which will dissolve the styrofoam. And these orange things are little cups that cat food came in. And you can have a whole collection of them that works great for like storing small parts while you're disassembling something or holding up this piece of Nidacore. This is the side that will be the bottom of the countertop, and so I'm putting a piece of 1708 on that. Just one layer, but it's the thickest of the glass for the countertop. The countertop will be stressed by having weight on top of it, which would cause the bottom to want to stretch if it was to bend. So this is where you put the heavy glass if it's going to be stressed in that way. So with the 1708 cured now, I can flip it over and do what will be the top of the countertop. And I make sure that I get any stray glass fibers or anything off of there before I coat it with polyester resin that's been catalyzed. And then for the surface layer, I'm using very lightweight surfboard fabric. It will create more than enough strength for this application. I wouldn't use this kind of glass, for example, on anything structural in the boat hull. But it's very thin, it smooths out easily, and one of the goals here is to have the glass so transparent that you see the cells in the Nidacore through it. Any place that there's a little bit of air still trapped in the glass will be kind of whitish, but once you get it completely wetted out and there's no more air in it, it will go more or less transparent. And you definitely want to do that all the time for strength, but it's even more important now. And here's how I seal the edges of the Nidacore, where it's been cut and you see the cells. I painted just a little bit of resin on that edge. The main thing is to get it on either side where the other glass is. And then I've laid a little strip of chopped strand mat that I cut to just the width of the panel, just slightly oversized. And now another layer of resin to wet out that chopped strand. And it will bond every now and then to a high point in the honeycomb in the middle, but the goal is to get it to bond to the glass on either side of the countertop. And I've sanded the edges flush before doing that, so there's a nice flush edge. And this epoxy that I'm putting on now is Countertop epoxy. It takes a long time to cure, and it's designed to self-level to a glossy finish. And that creates the smooth window that lets you look through to the honeycomb. And to spread it around, I'm using a notched trowel, like the kind of trowel you'd use for laying tile, where you want to get a very even coat of grout. And if I keep the trowel vertical and push the resin ahead of it, there's just the resin that can go through the notches and the trowel gets left behind. And so it creates a very even layer. And the first thing I want to do is to get resin over the entire surface of the countertop. And I'm trying not to let too much resin flow over the side at this point. Once I get the entire countertop covered and about the same thickness, only then will I come back and try to get some to flow over the edges. These ends here where there's a cutout for where a battery will sit were kind of tricky to get resin all the way up to the end. But now that I've covered the whole thing, now I'm going along and just allowing a little bit of resin to flow over the edge. And I can adjust the angle of my trowel so that there's more and then less resin flowing, depending on, how much of the pile of resin I'm pushing ahead is going over the edge. I want to have a nice thick layer everywhere on the countertop, but I also want to have an even amount going over the edge. And once I've done that, I'm going along with a 1-inch chip brush and smoothing out the resin along the edge. It was kind of spotty and drippy where it went over the edge from the trowel. So I'm just evening that out now with a cheap chip brush, which is disposable, and I'm not even going to try to clean the resin out of it. I'll throw it away. And the torch actually pops any bubbles that are left in the resin. You can actually see it happen as I go past the reflection of the light. And here is the beauty shot once all the bubbles have been popped with the torch. You go over it very quickly with the torch and don't let the torch dwell anywhere. It's actually the hot air coming off of the torch that pops the bubbles, so I don't really let the flame touch the epoxy. But you can see the honeycomb right through a layer of glass and the epoxy. So this is the counter to go in the back cabin of the carver.